Wonderful. Thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. How wonderful to have you all virtually joining us from so many different places across Europe and around the globe. And thank you all so much for taking the time to attend what I'm sure will be a truly inspiring event hosted by the Department for International Trade, Santander, the Railway Industry Association, and in partnership with KTN. We are really keen to see your questions come in. We will be having a Q&A slot at the end, so please do keep those coming in throughout the session. We'll be hearing from all our speakers and then answering those questions towards the end. Please do also connect with all of us on social media, LinkedIn and Twitter, to learn more about our various innovations and roles. For those of you who don't know us, KTN connects ideas, people and communities to respond to national and global challenges and to drive positive change through innovation. We use our wide networks and expertise to help with access to innovations, academia, contacts, and funding, and to accelerate real-world ideas and solutions for those who need them, as well as assisting the innovative companies themselves. I'm really keen to hear from everyone here today to see where we can help with your specific challenges and those opportunities that you may have. So please do get in touch on social media or using my email address, which is daisy.chamberlain@ktn-uk.org. And you can also find me on the KTN website. We're here today because rebuilding passenger confidence is central to ensuring that the rail sector in the UK and around the world recovers and continues to improve, and to look at what that might mean in practical and transformational terms. Innovative technologies, of course, will have a central role in this, and we'll be hearing from some of those who are leading in the space very shortly. But for now, I'm delighted to hand you over to our partners for the event at Santander.
Thanks, Daisy. Thank you for everyone's time this morning. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today. So I'm going to provide a very short introduction about my role and Santander. So I've been at Santander for 3.5 years. I sit within our international team and specifically responsible for CE, Nordic, Germany and UAE markets. My remit is to support our UK clients with their international strategy, working closely with our relationships team and sector specialists such as Halil Bedevi, who you can also see on the slide. And he specifically looks after the rail sector as well as a number of other manufacturing industries. So Santander has a global footprint where we are present directly in 15 markets around the world, and where we do not have a direct presence, we have developed a network of alliance partner banks. So with our sector and international focus, we aim to provide end-to-end financial and non-financial solutions across 5 key pillars that I have highlighted here on the slide. We deliver these solutions via our ecosystem of partners from across the globe, which we have built up over many years. So we offer bespoke services to support growth, such as our R&D offering, as well as software support, for example, our Santander University scheme, whereby we partner with 85 universities to support with internships, apprenticeships and work placements. Together with our manufacturing industry specialists, international ecosystem and colleagues, we're here to help you navigate globally. So on that note, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to collaborate together with the Department for International Trade and RIA on this webinar series. Please feel free to get in touch with any questions. Hope you enjoy the rest of the session. Thanks. Back to you, Daisy.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to hand over to my very good friends at the world-leading Railway Industry Association.
Trying to find the slide. I've gone the wrong way. Sorry.
No worries, it happens.
There we go. Hello, thank you, Daisy. Good morning, everybody. My name is Neil Walker. I'm the Exports Director at the Railway Industry Association. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this first in a mini-series of joint webinars titled Catch the Train, partnered with the Department for International Trade, Santander UK and KTN. RIA is a trade association for UK-based suppliers to the UK and worldwide railways. We have over 320 companies in membership covering all aspects of rolling stock and infrastructure supply, covering a diverse range of products and services. Many of our members are large or multinational companies, but it's important to remember that over 60% of our members are also UK SMEs. REA provides its members with extensive services, including special interest group meetings, supply chain initiatives, innovation events, and a flow of information on a weekly basis, covering topics such as technical, innovation, public affairs, commercial, political, and exporting. REA also works very closely with the Department for International Trade on exporting, which is my role. And we often do a lot of exporting events such as rail trade missions or UK pavilions. And these events and activities are open to all, whether you're a REA member or not. Recently, we have arranged virtual rail trade missions to Canada and Australia, and we are providing with DIT an international rail webinar covering the Middle East on the 19th of May. Looking forward to September onwards, we hope that we will have UK pavilions at Traco in Poland, Ausrail in Australia, Rail Solutions Asia in Malaysia, and Middle East Rail in Dubai. Now, the rail sector is vibrant around the world, and investment in infrastructure may be used to help create economic recovery post-COVID-19. Rail is also a green mode of transport, and investing in rail will ensure the economic recovery is environmentally beneficial too. I don't think it's possible to reach zero carbon without rail. But as we look for that recovery and to help it along, we need to understand best practice, share ideas and innovations, starting with this first webinar, Restoring Confidence in Passengers Using the Railways, which is key to ensuring that the rail sector fully recovers. So I hope you enjoyed today's event. I hope you find it interesting, and please ask questions and engage. Thanks. Over back to you, Daisy.
Fab. Thank you so much, both. And now on to our keynote speech from Kenan Pelayo, Deputy Trade Commissioner for Europe and Councillor for International Trade at the Department for International Trade. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Daisy, and also thank you to Monica and Neil for those excellent opening words. So yes, my name's Kenan Pelayo. Good morning, good afternoon or good evening to wherever you're dialing in from. I know we have a global audience for this first webinar. I'm really excited to be part of the launch of this new series, very important for the reasons that were just outlined now by Neil. So my name is Kenan. I'm Deputy Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Europe at the Department for International Trade. I'm based in the British Embassy in Berlin, but like many of us now, I'm working from home, as I'm sure you all, many of you are too, in these very strange times. So in the Department for International Trade, we secure UK and global prosperity by promoting and financing international trade, investment and championing free trade. And webinar series like these are essential to do what we as commercial diplomats do and commercial attaches do across the whole of Europe and the global network in DIT, which is to connect, to collaborate, to learn and share. So providing fantastic opportunities for businesses to export, to grow through investment, and also to see how we can collaborate with regulators, government, policymakers, trade associations to really address the global challenges that we all are facing. So I also have to apologize for the very strange camera angle. None of my technology was working properly today, so I'm speaking to you from a mobile device, so huge apologies for that, but I'll try and move on as quickly as we can to better speakers with better technology. So I think without a doubt, last year presented tremendous challenges to the entire railway sector. With limited access to traditional events and a distinct lack of opportunities to conduct face-to-face meetings, we had to find new and alternative ways of communicating with our customers and stakeholders alike. The Department for International Trade teams across Europe, together with partners from the Rail Industry Association and Santander, are launching a Catch the Train series of monthly webinars dedicated to railway industry, both in the UK and across Europe. Every month we will focus on a different topic. Today's will be around restoring confidence in passengers using railways. Future sessions will be around green railways and clean growth, rail innovation and research. So these are the topics of the first three of the series. The aim of this initiative is to exchange information on business opportunities and aspirations in Europe and on UK expertise in innovative UK products and solutions. We believe that these short monthly events will enable all to further nurture this relationship and promote continued cooperation between the UK and European markets to benefit all. So today we're going to talk about how to convince passengers to use and to return to railway transport. Across Europe and beyond, the pandemic has had a significantly negative effect on rail transport demand. Passenger train services in Europe alone have lost 24 billion euros worth of revenue in 2020. And according to Eurostat, rail passenger volumes in the second quartile of last year decreased by at least 50% in most EU member states. It's only natural that transport asset owners question whether the sudden move to remote working will lead to a permanent shift in work patterns with consequential impact on the number of future rail journeys undertaken. So there are many questions that are raised by the situation we face ourselves. Rebuilding passenger confidence is key to ensuring that the rail sector makes a full recovery. Questions like, whether the rail sector needs to consider fundamental changes need to be explored. Increased hygiene standards will remain a concern for some time to come, along with themes such as staff tracing and solutions, social distancing and inclusion, and contactless systems. Questions like, how will innovative technologies support train operators and station managers to restore customer trust? Split across 8 separate sessions, all lasting approximately 8 minutes each, you'll hear from some truly innovative companies who will share a common goal to help address some of these key challenges faced by the rail sector today. Our guest speakers will cover a number of important topics, such as welcoming customers back to rail, with a safer and better experience, and delivering confidence and accelerating revenue. So I'd like to say a big thank you to our event partners, the Rail Industry Association, Santander, and the Knowledge Transfer Network, as well as my own team and colleagues across Europe, including Sylvia and Mark. You'll be hearing more from our partners and colleagues and panelists shortly. So I really hope you enjoy the webinar. I hope you enjoy the entire series, and thank you very much for joining today. And thanks, Daisy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There are so many pertinent points there. I think the last year being a challenge is absolutely correct. I think everyone on this call can really attest to that. But it's marvellous, I think, from a rail innovation context to know that there is that support from the department, from RIA and from Santander. And really, I believe everyone on this call, as well as myself, I think, looking to boost those contacts, that communication and cooperation is absolutely key to the future, as you say. So now on to the fantastic Guy Yeomans, Principal Horizon Scanning at Rail Safety and Standards Board, to prevent on the transition out of COVID-19 and those common issues as we look to that uncertain future landscape.
Thank you, Daisy, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to join you all this morning. My name is Guy Yeomans. I'm the Principal for Horizon Scanning at RSSB, which is the Rail Safety Standards Board. This looks after safety issues for England, Scotland and Wales, the GB Rail network. For those of you unfamiliar with the organisation, we have 4 key objectives to help the industry understand risk, to guide and manage the maintenance of railway standards, to help with industry research and innovation programmes, and to facilitate industry collaboration to drive future improvement. So this morning, I want to talk about partly our COVID situation, but also address this from a position in terms of the common and shared issues which are facing most transport sectors or modes, and most specifically, most organisations within rail across countries. So I want to try and identify a couple of key themes which are pertinent to the conversation today around the idea of how do we think about restoring trust and confidence, and really try and set the scene for the remainder of the webinar. So this is part of an existing programme of work that we've been doing at RSSB since spring 2020. It's the Rail Biosafety Horizon Scanning Programme, and we have been supporting a variety of industry working groups with rapid analysis, situational awareness, and deeper research across a range of COVID-related issues, from the epidemiology and the science behind it, through to the development of different testing regimes, vaccines, and customer responses to those. And that's all been with a view to trying to support the sector with its 2 key concerns at this time, which is promoting and ensuring the safety and health of both passengers and staff. This is an ongoing programme, and we'll be doing further work on this over the course of the year. So where have we come from, and where might we be heading towards? The first thing is that this situation has changed rapidly and drastically since the end of last year. At the end of November last year, we were still effectively in a pandemic. And at that point, there was no obvious solution or way out of that other than different forms of active management. The introduction of a number of effective vaccines, which have been produced at a very rapid pace, and in certain cases using new forms of technology, has changed the dynamic. It has changed the situation we find ourselves in. We can now look towards a state of being post-pandemic, and what we find ourselves in now is a transitional phase. It is now moving out of the pandemic through to that post-pandemic state. And this will be guided by a key variable, which is the relationship between the immunized population and the transmission rate. Now, this is a dynamic situation, and it's going to be continue to be influenced by 4 key drivers. The medical response, which is both looking at vaccines as well as hospital treatments, social implications and social behaviours, the economic impacts of COVID, and of course, the political circumstances and the political actions which are taken to pull all of these things together. So the first thing I want to highlight is that we remain in a situation where the actions in these areas is still really important for us. So what can we look at in terms of how we're moving ahead? This recent graphic from the Financial Times, I think, articulates very clearly where we are right now. This interplay between how we can reduce transmission versus what actions can we take, and in what form and at what pace, to actually open up our societies and our economies, of which active transport is a part. The first thing to say here, looking not just from a UK or a GB perspective, but on a pan-European perspective, is that this will necessarily involve different processes, and that the timelines within which this will happen will be variable, are highly likely to be non-linear, and may be subject to change and adaptation. And lastly, over the course of the pandemic and also going forward, we think it's useful to anticipate that confidence itself from passengers may not be a static thing. There may be ongoing changes, different attitudes, different approaches to passenger confidence. So we won't face the same situation, though some of the issues and the factors behind this, our environment at the present time, are shared. So if we look at a range of primary concerns, this is really about infection risk and the health awareness of passengers. The 7 green factors identified here are not new to you. We've all been speaking about these things, you know, for constantly over many months. Where is the transmission rate? Do we have vaccines? Do we have supply of vaccines? What is the immunization process? How are we going to look at further mutations within SARS-CoV-2? Might those mutations pose additional problems? And we know from our combined experience over the last 4 months that it was the emergence of the B.1.1.7 variant which has caused subsequent problems. SARS-CoV-2 remains open to further mutations. There were a whole range of different social restrictions. And also we now see the beginnings of what we've termed the health status indicators. How are we as individual within a population going to indicate that we may have been vaccinated or we might not have been? So for example, the EU Green Pass, which I understand may actually go through the EU Parliament in June. The whole idea of immunity passports. So we may face a situation where we have a dynamic relationship between those in the population that have been vaccinated and can demonstrate that versus those that haven't. And lastly, the demographic issue here. We know that response to this has been about trying to protect and secure the health of those that are most vulnerable. We also know that if you contract COVID, that potentially your age can be a significant contributor to how ill that may actually make you. So we have a whole mix here. These are not static, these remain dynamic and interrelated factors. And this comes down to how might this influence our choices or the choices of passengers to continue using rail. And we frame this in 3 ways. We can see that the passengers may return to a pre-COVID state. COVID may pass, they may think that that's fine and just go back to the way they were approaching using rail prior to the early part of 2020. Equally, it could be transformed. And so the key question is, how is that altered? And is that alteration significant? Is that alteration enduring? Will those alterations be permanent? And how do we understand them? And lastly, might it actually fundamentally collapse pre-COVID behaviours? So the use of rail will decline and be replaced by other things. One of the things we have to think about here is that as we go forward, our personal and shared experiences will play in this. So apologies, just a slight hiccup there with the controls. So this leads us very quickly to a number of secondary impacts that we need to be aware of. We've spoken about these earlier in Kevin's introduction. What will happen to employment? What will happen to working patterns? What pressure will there be on household budgets? Will lifestyle choices change? And may people develop new travel habits? One of the key things we're seeing is the idea that actually previous purchasing dynamics for people who would use rail may change and now become discretionary. That might not be universal, but what does that mean? And might the issue of confidence in the health and safety of rail become part of that new discretionary purchasing dynamic? So this leads us to a couple of final points. We're in a transition phase and we're moving to a post-pandemic state. There are 3 key parts of this which remain highly ambiguous at this stage. The timelines. Timelines are uncertain and will themselves be subject to different interruptions, different changes. So it's hard for us to put down where we think the transition will end and where that post-pandemic phase will start. Lastly, it's unclear what that end state will look like. Are countries aiming for eradication? If they are, is that feasible and achievable? Can we anticipate that COVID will become endemic in some form, whether in individual countries or in individual parts of countries? Might it actually become more of a seasonal issue, in which case will issues such as the need for seasonal vaccination boosters become a constant part of how rail needs to think about its health and safety going forward? And lastly, it is at this stage unclear whether any perceptions about the health risks of rail will endure over time. And this sets up 4 key challenges from our perspective. Firstly, we know rail has responded directly to COVID with a whole range of measures, some of which were mentioned earlier in terms of sanitization and cleaning regimes. Are these sustainable over the longer term, and will they be retained by rail organisations? Secondly, as our understanding of the epidemiology of COVID continues to increase, are the measures that we've put in place the most appropriate ones going forward? And here I'm thinking of the report last week from the US Center for Disease Control, the CDC, which perhaps for the first time for a major organization indicated that the risk from surfaces from fomite transmission may actually be less significant than that from airborne transmission. And that's quite a significant change in the narrative. Thirdly, if rail organisations choose to reduce or change some of the responses, what will that mean for public and staff perceptions? How will that be managed and communicated? And lastly, as we move out of COVID into that post-pandemic world, what will rail's approach be to establishing longer-term resilience to future potential public health emergencies? And that's an issue that certainly RSSB will be doing some more thinking on. So in summary, we still have a whole range of dynamic, interacting factors which are directly impacting passengers' perceptions of risk in terms of travelling on rail. But we can anticipate that there'll be a range of secondary factors which will emerge over the course of the next 6 to 12 months to potentially complicate that picture. And so this remains an active and dynamic space. And I think our challenge as the rail sector is how are we continually going to track and understand and be aware of what those concerns are in terms of the confidence for rail. Okay, I'm very happy to answer any other questions, but my thanks at this point. Daisy.
Guy, thanks for that. Brilliant. And do keep your questions coming in, please, via the Q&A box so that we can answer those towards the end. KTN and RSSB have had a lot of discussions in the biosafety horizon scanning space, and the support and the awareness that RSSB can offer really is nonpareil as we move towards that post-pandemic uncertain space that the Guy was referencing. But for now, we hand over to Richard Scott, Partnership and Strategy Director at the West Coast Partnership. Richard will be discussing the process of welcoming customers back to rail.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining me. I'm Richard Scott, the Partnership and Strategy Director at West Coast Partnership. The West Coast Partnership is formed of 2 parts. The first is Avanti West Coast, which runs intercity services on the West Coast Main Line between London and Birmingham, Manchester, North Wales, Liverpool and Scotland, and is the busiest mixed-use railway in Europe. The second part of our business is West Coast Partnership Development, which is the shadow operator for HS2, and which works closely with the Department for Transport, HS2 and Network Rail to plan for and advise on the services that will use the new high-speed infrastructure. I want to talk to you today, though, about what we've been doing to improve the customer experience on our trains and at our stations, and what we aim to achieve in the future. As a team and as a train operator, we've been working hard to listen to the needs and priorities of our customers. Of course, the last year has seen unprecedented change in the rail industry. Clearly, we've far fewer customers. Numbers have been down by as much as 90%, and that also means much less revenue, of course. In turn, that's led to new contracts with the Department for Transport, as taxpayers have had to step in to keep the railways moving and ensure those passengers who really do need to travel can get to where they need to go. And of course, everyone in the industry is extremely grateful to the government for the very significant support that's been provided. We've also had repeated timetable changes as lockdowns come and go, which has meant continual updates for passengers, but also had a big impact operationally. The timetable planning teams within train companies and Network Rail have seen their workloads increase significantly. Of course, there have been other operational impacts around COVID restrictions for our staff as well as passengers, and some elements of our business plans have had to be deferred. The West Coast Partnership is built on collaboration, and we've had to work with the rest of the industry as never before over the last 12 months. And for our people, it's been a complete change to ways of working. Mandatory face coverings unless exempt, a renewed focus on cleaning. And our people have responded superbly to all of these challenges. Now we're in reassurance mode for passengers, letting them know it's safe to travel if they need to. That will change to more proactive promotion in the months to come, of course. Now, where we always start in customer experience is improvement, because there's always room for improvement, and we'll be the first to admit that we don't always get it right. From work undertaken by the Watchdog Transport Focus and our own customer surveys and panels and customer feedback through social media, of course, these are what we've identified as customer priorities. Those regular pinch points around punctuality and disruption will continue to be a very large factor in encouraging people back, of course. We've been working with Network Rail to see what additional infrastructure work can be carried out on the network ahead of customers coming back in, we hope, much larger numbers. We know that user-friendly booking and Wi-Fi are also priorities, and our people are always a big feature in terms of their availability and helpfulness. Some customers are certainly likely to need more reassurance when they come back than others. Those priorities, of course, are ones that always existed even before the pandemic, but some things are new. We know COVID has created new priorities for customers which change the face of the rail industry, both now and for the future. There'll be increased expectations of space, comfort and cleanliness at stations and on the train. And we definitely expect these will continue even after the risks of COVID-19 hopefully disappear with the vaccine rollout and the easing of restrictions. During lockdown, consumers have got into the habit of online shopping and using cashless payments. This has created a great opportunity for us in the rail industry to explore and accelerate the use of digital tickets for a contactless journey and to look at the increased importance of flexibility to change travel plans. Customer insight also tells us to expect recovery in customer demand to be led by leisure travel, as more people look at holidays in the UK. When the lockdown was eased last summer, we certainly saw leisure travel bounce back a lot faster than business travel. And because of travel restrictions during the pandemic, we need to work a lot harder to showcase the benefits of rail now to encourage that shift from car to rail. And even though many of us have had enough of Teams and Zoom calls, this has become a new reality, and many will still opt to meet virtually rather than face-to-face. But face-to-face is, of course, still the gold standard in communication, and rail will always be there to facilitate that. So, what have we done to improve the customer experience so far? Well, there are now enhanced cleaning regimes at stations and on trains with a focus on high touch points such as ticket machines. We're also using long-lasting sanitizer on our trains. Hand sanitizer units have been installed at every station and are now permanent fixtures. And in total, an extra 2,000 cleaning hours per month are being completed at stations. We've promoted social distancing by recommending customers reserve a seat in advance and in order to ensure they can travel on the service that they want to use. This has been extremely successful as we reduce services, and we hope to adopt this approach and continue it as we step back up. We've used our channels, of course, station announcements, marketing messages, social media, to ensure customers wear face coverings. We even gave one of our Pendolino trains a face covering to help get the message across. On board, during the pandemic, we've trialled initiatives like at-seat ordering and click and collect, where customers can order food and drink from their seat and have it brought to them, save them walking through the train. We've also increased the flexibility to change and cancel ticket bookings with live updates around busy services. We recently introduced a new website and customer app, and we'll be building on this foundation through a program of new features for our website, customer app and station retailing channels, which will be introduced over the coming months. So far, we've introduced our own smart card and easy-to-use digital tickets for a touch-free journey. We've also introduced features like Track My Train, enabling customers to follow the progress of the train they're travelling on or waiting for using their phone, keeping them more informed. So that's a flavour of the things that we've already done during the pandemic, and there are more improvements on the way, you'll be pleased to hear, for Avanti West Coast passengers. The first up is personalisation. We'll help customers feel in greater control of their journey with our customer app and new best-in-class website. The app will be more than just about buying tickets, it'll be a companion with real-time updates on the entire end-to-end journey, including in times of disruption, which we know is crucial. We'll make it easier to change the journey and change a reservation with a seat picker feature, along with easy access to upgrades and extra services like booking assistance at the station. We know, of course, that a really crucial part of creating a positive, memorable journey experience is the warm welcome and great service from our people, which they really are fantastic at. That will continue, and we'll support our staff to help our customers through easy access to information about journey plans and preferences and the best way to plan a particular journey for a particular customer. The refurbishment programme for our Pendolino trains starting this year will really raise the bar for comfort. There'll be a great new design for brand new seats throughout standard class and a new Avanti West Coast look and feel throughout the train. And as these refurbished trains enter service during the latter part of this year and beyond, this will definitely provide a boost for customer perceptions of comfort and cleanliness on the train. There'll be investment in Wi-Fi over the next 2 years, which will improve the quality and reliability of connectivity on board our trains by filling in those blank spots on the network which have no coverage. This will enable our customers to use their journeys even more productively or enjoy the devices, of course, at their leisure. And we're looking to improve the end-to-end experience by working in a more collaborative way than ever before with Network Rail and other train companies. For example, we've adopted a joint approach to training for staff at Birmingham New Street, so all staff will be able to offer the same high-quality assistance for customers. This will help providing consistent information on local public transport links, for example. We'll be investing in the station environment, providing information for connections with other modes of transport to help people take part in those modal shifts that they need to do, and again reinforce an easy end-to-end journey. And we'll also improve secure cycling storage facilities, electric vehicle charging points, and number plate recognition for car parks. And finally, we'll be working with industry, passenger groups and local authorities on station improvement schemes, customer research pieces, and on planning for special events, of course, like football matches, which are going to start soon with fans returning, concerts and the Commonwealth Games in 2022. So hopefully this gives a sense of what's in store for our customers as we encourage the return to rail and restore passenger confidence. And of course, it goes without saying, we can't wait to welcome everybody back. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Richard. And what really caught my attention there was that focus on opportunity. So in the digital space, and especially looking in the kind of leisure market space as well, the opportunity that we have there. As we move forward, I think it is really vital that we look to what we can positively achieve as we move forward, whilst at the same time, of course, keeping people safe. So let's move straight over to Arta Resma, member of the board CFO at PKP Intercity, and he will be addressing the topic of safety in this new future rail landscape. Arta, are you with us? Okay, it looks like we may potentially have lost Arta, I think.
It
He's
looks like
visible.
Arthur is speaking. Hi Arthur, can you hear us?
Looks like we're having some trouble. Okay, never mind. Do we want... Oh no, there's Arta. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
He is off mute, so I'm not sure if he's got his audio.
Oh, it always happens, doesn't it? Just when you need to be speaking, that's always when the technical issues come up. Arta, we still can't hear you, I'm afraid. Whilst we're just waiting for this far. Ooh, meeting's being recorded. We have had some really interesting questions coming in so far as well. I think some really interesting points about that shift in rail, regardless of COVID-19. So I'm just wondering, whilst we're just waiting for this kind of technical hitch to be resolved, I do have a really interesting question from my good friend Julia at RSSB. She's asking, and this is open to all the panelists, by the way, including our speakers who've already spoken, do we think that a shift in the use of rail would have happened anyway, with or without COVID, which I think is actually a really interesting question. So as she says, home working was increasing before March 2019. So has the pandemic just accelerated a process that was already naturally happening? So would anyone like to come in on that as a panelist? Guy, I know you were talking about this topic. Richard, you're also more than welcome to jump in. But yeah, would this already have happened?
Daisy, I'm happy to take that. Well, I think it's an interesting question. I mean, people have been talking about home working and video conferencing being the demise of rail for about 30 years, and it's never happened. Passenger numbers have been rising consistently for us for many, many years, and showed no signs of tailing off. So for us, certainly, I don't think that is the case. I mean, we're predominantly a discretionary travel operator focusing on the leisure market and business travel, and people still want to do those things face to face. They still want to go and see family and friends. For the commuter markets, it might be a bit different, but for us, there's been no slack off at all.
Yeah, I think that's a really relevant point. I think going forward, I think we'll definitely be looking at a balance. So thank you so much for picking that up, Richard. Arta, are you with us? Can we hear you?
Better. Is just now is better?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Good.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard, for jumping in there whilst we needed a little bit of space. Arta, I will hand straight over to you whilst you've got capacity.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Artur Rozmer, and I'm responsible for financial part of the PKP Intercities, the Polish railway company. As you can see on the right screen, you can see our logo, and the left side you can see one of our trains from our fleet. Just a moment. Oh, PKP Intercity is a Polish national long-distance railway carrier. We provide transport between the major cities and popular tourist destinations in Poland, and we connect smaller towns with agglomerations, as well as enable comfortable travel across Europe. Currently, we connected approximately 420 cities and towns, and every day, company launch approximately 400 trains. In order to constantly improve traveling comfort, we modernization of existing units and purchase of new coaches, locomotives, and electric multiply units. As part of the continuing of the rolling stock strategy, our company will invest more than 4 billion euro in the modern rolling stock till 2030. We launched both commercial connections and connections provided under the public service contract concluded with the Ministry of Infrastructure. Connections provided under the public service counts for 80% of connections operated by the company. Currently, we have 4 categories of trains in domestic transport: Express, Intercity, Premium, served by 20 Pendolino trains offering attractive travel time and higher travel comfort, and Express Intercity with consists of a modern car, Intercity with modern from the electric multiply units and modernization cars, and the biggest one is TLK, offering economical travel. Over the past few years, the rail passenger market in Poland has developed dynamically. The process of annual growth of several percent in the number of travelers began in 2015. 280 million passengers used in Poland, Polish railway. 4 years later, in 2018, 335 million use in Poland our trains. It means that we notice increase almost 20%. An even higher growth rate was evident in the case of number of our passengers in our company. In 2015, 31 million passengers use our trains, and in 2019, almost 49 million passengers use our trains. It means that we notice increase of nearly 57%. The next slide show us what is the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and new safety rules. Because the dynamic growing popularity of Polish railway and our company was temporarily halted by a coronavirus epidemic. The restrictions in the public sphere have dramatically changed for the demand of travel and the number of passengers in our company trains. At the beginning of pandemic, we developed and implemented plans ensuring a high safety for passengers and company employees. What is important, the obligation to cover mouth and nose while all the journey, keep the distance from other passengers. There is the 50% occupancy limit on trains. Train managers and conductors have been using personal protection equipment and maintaining personal hygiene since the beginning of pandemic. Protective masks and gloves, as well as hand washing and disinfection gel. Their contact with travelers during the control is done at the safe distance through the use of modern contactless terminals. Train doors are opened automatically to limit passengers' contact with the buttons. All trains are disinfected and cleaned after each journey. From the March 2020 to the end of the last month, we have already carried out nearly 415,000 disinfections. In order to mitigate the crisis situation and maintain the existing employment, having in mind the reduction of the cost of the company's operation, we made a decision to reduce the working time and salary in proportion to it. All employees were covered by 20% reduction in working time for a period of 2 months. The safety procedures and the procedures introduced in connection with the coronavirus pandemic are appreciated by the passengers. This is the result of the satisfaction survey conducted in October last year, and show that 83% of passengers positively evaluated safety on board trains. It is worth noting that so far, no case of infection has been confirmed on train, which clearly indicated that the railway is not a source of coronavirus. This is the good news. The bad news is that in 2020, nearly 26 million passengers use our trains. It means that we decrease compared to 45% compared to 2019. The key of our company further development is intensive rolling stock investment. Despite the ongoing pandemic, the necessary maintenance and repair work was carried out and tenders were awarded, contracts signed, and the new procedures indicated. We entered this year with the contracted agreement with a total value more than 1 billion euro. Just a moment. It's not my. It's just a moment. Just a moment. Oh, good. The ongoing epidemic and the related restriction in the public sphere are contributing to reducing the demand for rail travel. Based on current analysis of the attendance of our trains, our company introduced to our network of connections, adapting its offer to the current interest. In spring last year, due to the outbreak of the coronavirus, the decrease in train attendance reached 93–94%. At that time, the network of our company connections was limited, but despite this, we managed to maintain communication accessibly and maintain connections between the cities reached by our trains. On average, around 60% of trains were cancelled and 8% of shortened routes. This slow showed at the responding to passengers' expectations. As a result of satisfaction survey among passengers business travels in pandemic condition would choose our trains as a mean of communication. If there was a need to make a such trip in the coming days, 47% of people would use the services of the carrier, preferring the train to other means of transport, including their own cars. The research also confirms that the preventive action taken by our company are clearly correlated with the expectation of passengers. Passengers expect the carrier to limit the number of the passengers, an obligation of wearing masks by the staff and train passengers, and regular ozone disinfection on train, which has been taken place since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. We expect the passengers to return to rail once the pandemic is over. At the same time, we were aware of a result of the analysis of transport market, which show that the tourist travel segment will recover faster after the pandemic and only than the business travel market. Thank you for your attention, and I would like to wish all the best for my fellow rail workers, which face the same challenges as we do. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Artur. Some really interesting information there. I'm really pleased we fixed your technical hitch as well. It always has to happen, doesn't it? And I think what you said really highlights how the issues that we have in rail really are universal in this pandemic context. So for hygiene, for passenger behaviour, the distancing that you mentioned through the contactless terminals, how modern digital technology can really support rail during and beyond this crisis. And for me, those positive passenger feedback statistics were really heartening. So really lovely to hear that. Just a reminder, please do keep your questions coming in for our panelists via the Q&A function. We are running a little over time, so now we will jump straight over to Richard Fisher, Managing Director at 10 Transport Consultancy, to introduce their innovation, Travel Space.
Hi everybody, and thank you, Daisy. I'm assuming that you can all see me and therefore unfortunately see my kitchen behind me. Apologies about that. It's the one of the pitfalls from having to work from home, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm Richard Fisher, and I'm excited to be here today to introduce you to Travel Space. I have to go the other way. First of all, let me tell you about the companies behind Travel Space. So Tractic, Nickel Design, and 10 Transport Consultancy are a consortium of British SMEs who've developed the concept for Travel Space. Now, Junction have been appointed as our developer for Travel Space, and they have a track record in developing innovative apps and systems for UK transport operators. Now, Travel Space was initially funded by Innovate UK, and as part of our funding deal, we're required to deploy the functionality of Travel Space as a minimum viable product in a standalone app. Now, we expect that that MVP is going to be trialed in service next month, but the development of Travel Space doesn't stop there. We see Travel Space as being the basis for a mobility as a service platform, and we're already setting functional requirements for the evolution of Travel Space to cater for metro and light rail, as well as bus services. Now, we recognise that actually the travel space functionality will almost certainly be deployed as an API with our product embedded into a transport provider's native app. And our development is based upon research and is focused on enhancing the passenger experience when doing that. But we also recognise that there's a commercial reality, that the return of passenger confidence drives both a return to revenue for operators and also stimulates the economic activity that's so important to our towns and cities. So as you can see, the work we're doing to develop travel space is backed by research. Now, this study into how technology can improve public transport actually predates the COVID-19 pandemic and highlights that passengers want to be able to book a seat and manage that booking and be informed about current occupancy levels. What the pandemic has done is actually amplify those sentiments. And Transport Focus have done this survey, which tells us that 54% of survey respondents said that they'd not feel safe when making a journey by train. In the same study, Transport Focus also found that 49% of respondents want some form of reservation system to be in place. Now, not all forms of public transport are actually set up for seat reservations. So when we designed Travel Space, we designed a product that gives customers the chance to book a space rather than a specific seat. Travel Space meets the passenger need and gives them the confidence to come back to rail. That drives the return to revenue. But for an operator who is seeking to smooth demand out over the day and remove peaks, the deployment of Travel Space will be much quicker and easier than the introduction to differential pricing. For passengers, Travel Space provides journey planning with real-time loading data, giving them confidence to travel again. Travel Space will also provide passengers with journey updates and disruption so that they can make the right travel choices for them. And it's important to say that we recognise that's very important for people who have certain accessibility needs, and Travel Space is also designed with them in mind. Now, these are actual screenshots of Travel Space, showing a passenger searching for a train, checking the loadings and selecting their journey. Now, Travel Space has also got the functionality to produce a QR-coded boarding pass should operators wish to use the system to apply capacity controls to services. But passengers can just choose to follow a journey and receive updates if that's how the operator wants to deploy it. The functionality is there for both. So that was me, and that was Travel Space very briefly. I'll just leave my contact details here if anybody would like to get in touch and discuss Travel Space with us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Richard. I think this is a really crucial piece of work. Again, obviously looking at that restoration of confidence, not just for passengers, but for staff and in an operator context as well. So for the operators, I think that real-time information link, as we learn more about COVID, as Guy mentioned, is certainly something that we need as we move forward and as we move into that post-pandemic world, as much as, you know, the current situation as well. So thank you so much for that. And now over to Connor O'Riordan at Seatfrog. Apologies if I got the surname wrong. To present their work. Delivers passenger confidence and accelerates revenue. So over to you, Connor.
Thank you very much, Daisy. Hello, everybody. My name is Connor O'Riordan, and I'm the commercial director here at Seatfrog. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to speak about how Seatfrog is working with rail operators to help deliver confidence amongst passengers and supporting operators to, I suppose, drive ancillary revenue. For those of you that don't know Seatfrog is a travel technology business that, again, works with rail operators to help supercharge ancillary revenue. Through the Seatfrog platform, we offer passengers the ability to buy last-minute tickets, to swap existing prepaid tickets, and to upgrade existing standard class tickets. As we've been mentioned for the last presentations, the last 12 months has been an incredibly, I suppose, difficult time. And we spent an awful lot of time working with rail operators to, I suppose, look to define revenue recovery strategies for when we eventually do come out of this pandemic. The three main questions that we've been asked on a regular basis by the rail operators is, number one, how do we attract customers back to rail? How do we manage loads and maximize safety for our passengers? And when we have the passengers back traveling, How do we accelerate revenue on every train through ancillary revenue? And before launching into answers that we thought was correct for these particular questions, what we began to do is we've looked at the passenger. Daisy, can I just check that my slides are coming up correctly?
We can see the 2021 revenue recovery strategy slide at the moment.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Perfect.
So before we delve into how we answer the rail operators' questions, I guess really we need to look at the passenger. I think any recovery will be driven by the passengers, and understanding what that passenger will look for when traveling is most important to rail operators. What we see here is Bob. Bob previously used to travel by, from a business or leisure perspective, he always used rail. Coming back, Bob's now been working from home for the last 12 months, and he's beginning to look at, he's got different questions. So I think the first one and most importantly is, whether I travel by train or not, and that's fundamental to all of us here on this call today. Underpinning everything is around safety. Will I feel safe in the train? I haven't had a meeting face to face in the last 12 months. My meeting might overrun. I need some sort of flexibility. And you know what? I've actually saved quite a lot of money over the last 12 months. So I'm happy to travel off peak if that means I can save a few quid. And again, digital is really important, because I think from the pandemic, what it's shown is, like myself and everyone else on the call, we've become far more demanding as digital consumers. What I'm going to introduce now next is our latest innovation, which is called Seatfrog Flex. Seatfrog Flex Seatfrog Flex allows passengers to book tickets to travel within a specific time window. So Bob, in this instance, has a meeting in Edinburgh, and he's deciding what mobility to travel. He logs on to the Seatfrog app to specify a specific window of when he will travel. Through the Seatfrog dynamic pricing engine, Seatfrog will present him with a price. In this instance, you'll see from the second slide that Bob is looking to travel between 12:10 and 5:10 to be in Edinburgh. And lo and behold, what happens is Bob successfully gets a ticket, but only to travel within those specific time window. What this allows the rail operator to do is ultimately to, I suppose, bring Bob back to rail as an affordable means of transport, but as well as that, also to put Bob on less busy trains. The second question that we've been asked by operators very much, and this is very much pre-pandemic as well, is from a flexibility perspective. How can we as a rail operator offer superior flexibility and balance train loads through better communication and incentives? In this instance, Bob meeting is going very well, for example, but it's overrunning. So Bob has two options. Bob can either, I guess, cut the meeting short, or actually book a new ticket. But via Seatfrog, and we're very happy to announce that this product was launched last month with one of our operators, he can actually log on to the Seatfrog app and look to move on to a later train. So in this instance, we can see Bob was initially booked onto the 5 o'clock train, but using Seatfrog train swap, he can actually book for a later train at 6:30, finish off his meeting and travel back to London. I guess from a flexibility perspective and through the Seatfrog dynamic pricing engine, it's dynamically priced. Bob pays the difference of the fare in line with what the rail operators are happy. And again, from the rail operators' perspective, there's an incremental revenue perspective there that they can gain from, but also ensure that Bob is put on, potentially a less busier, safer train. And finally, the third question, which we looked upon at the start, is when we get passengers back traveling, how do we as a rail operator maximize revenue, in this instance from first class inventory? Seatfrog's legacy business, pre-pandemic certainly has been very much focused on upgrades. Bob's meeting in this instance has gone really well, and he decides to treat himself to an upgrade. In this instance, again, he logs onto the Seatfrog app and he looks to bid to upgrade to first class. As we can see here, the current price for the bid is at £15. Bob bids 16, and Bob's luck is in today, and he wins an upgrade to travel back and style to London in first class. I guess, what I try to touch upon over the last, 5, 6, 7 minutes is that the pandemic, and certainly has presented a huge challenge for passengers, for rail, and particularly for rail operators, But we see this also as a huge opportunity to bring back passengers back traveling, but back traveling with rail. I think at the heart of, I suppose, the return to rail will be the passenger. And we feel by working with rail operators, we put the passenger at the fore to increase engagement, improve customer experience even further. This will ultimately result in allowing operators to, I suppose, dynamically adapt pricing to be able to maximize ancillary revenue, but also to be able to balance their loads effectively, put people on less busier trains, and ultimately underline the biggest question that passengers will have before coming back to rail is that they're safe. With that, I'll hand back to Daisy, and thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Connor. I think Seatfrog has really clear benefits in terms of both the passenger flexibility and the cost saving benefits, but of course the really attractive revenue implications can't be ignored. The flex innovation is really exciting to see. That's from a rail innovation perspective, but also as a rail customer myself, so I can see how that is a really attractive tool. So thank you so much for taking the time. Now we'll hear from Andrew Budd, CEO at iProve, to present around improving rail travel safety with biometric credentials.
Thank you very much indeed, Daisy. I'm the founder and CEO of London-based iProve. We are a global company with our headquarters literally overlooking Waterloo Station, the busiest station in Europe. We're specialists in the task of biometrically verifying users on their own devices, whether that's at home on their couch or whether they're traveling, and doing so in a way that is extremely inclusive and easy to use, yet also secure enough to meet the needs of customers like the US government, the British government, the government of Singapore, and the government of Australia. We've won a number of awards, including a cool vendor, which made me feel uncharacteristically cool. One of our recent wins last year was a contract from Innovate UK to work with Eurostar on the development of the first ever rail-focused biometric ticketing and corridor system, Project Laminar. That project is in progress, but has obviously been delayed by COVID for the simple reason that the flow of passengers has slowed to across the channel, has slowed to a trickle. But we continue to work with them. And this turns out to be a general case of enormous interest to the rail industry in many, many contexts. Fundamentally, what this is about creating travel credentials which include a number of different pieces of information about the customer. In the case of the Eurostar example, that includes their passport information because a border is being crossed. As we'll see in a minute, that information might also include, for example, their COVID status. The important thing is that this travel credential is created before the passenger presents themselves at the gate. At any time from when they're sitting on their couch at home, even to when they're in the station. And a number of pieces of information are created into a credential bundle, which then merely requires the passenger to authenticate themselves by means of their face at the time when they present themselves at the barrier. And all that is intending to do is to authenticate that the passenger is the rightful owner of this credential, potentially complicated credential, when they pass through. The advantage of this that Eurostar and other operators have seen is that it creates a much safer experience. It's very smooth, it's completely contactless, and it's a very convenient experience when the passenger presents themselves at the station. This has been the need for this has been accentuated clearly by COVID. Travel credentials have historically been transferable, either commercially, in practice, in theory, but sometimes also in practice, because identity checks have never really been very heavily enforced. So travel tickets have traditionally been transferable, but in a world in which travelers may be required to assert their COVID status, whether they've been vaccinated or whether they've had a fast lateral flow test or a PCR test, or have maybe recovered from COVID in the past, where there may be a differential travel experience based upon people's COVID status, then of course that status is tied to the individual, and therefore therefore integrated COVID status tickets cannot be transferable. and therefore it is essential that that the bearer is authenticated at the time at which they board. Now, that can create a breakage point. Obviously, if checking of credentials one by one at the point of entry is a slow and tedious business, then what it can cause obviously is a huge throughput bottleneck. And international train operators have found that that passport checking can actually limit the number of people that are able to get on a train. And of course, in a COVID time, it can create crowding where social distancing rules suggest that would be undesirable. We've seen longer term benefits beyond simply COVID. This authentication of the traveller means creates the possibility of shifting from PNRs to actual identified human beings. And this obviously opens up the possibility to engage in longer term relationships with passengers. It obviously enables background checks to be done on passengers to ensure that travellers don't present a threat to their fellow passengers. And it means that in the dreadful circumstance of an accident, it becomes easier to know which individuals were actually on the train and were potentially affected by the incident. Now, there are really two ways in which the passenger can be authenticated. The most obvious one, and this is the one I'll talk about this a little bit more because it's the one that we're doing with Eurostar, is at the gate by means of a biometric gate. A biometric gate means that a sensor is put up at some point in the corridor. Very often, despite this photograph, there are actually no gates. That in fact it's just a taped off access point, and somebody simply walks down, and a screen monitors the passenger, and it either goes red or green. It goes red when they shouldn't walk, and it goes green when they should walk, and that ensures social distancing. And if there's an anomaly, then maybe a member of staff will greet the person as they come through to sort out whatever problems there are. So the person creates the credential remotely on their device anywhere, including at home, maybe on a kiosk somewhere else in the station, at a non-critical point where crowding and resource is not a limitation. And then they simply turn up, and a biometric sensor at the ticket gate looks at them and allows them to walk through, either gated or ungated. The alternative model, which I think we're going to start to see appearing, is a different model based upon so-called verifiable credentials, which means that the passenger assembles the various credentials into a wallet, which may be either on their phone or on the cloud and accessible from their phone. Some of that might include, for example, the digital travel credential, which is being standardized by various travel organizations. And then just before they go through the gate, the user authenticates themselves on their own phone. That is, no special hardware. They authenticate themselves on their own phone. That biometric verification is added to their credential stack, creates a composite barcode. That barcode is then read by a barcode reader. And if they've authenticated themselves within the last 30 seconds or minute, and substitution, and the people flow is organized in such a way that substitution is not practical, then they can be allowed through. And this is just a different model. So you have these two models: authentication by the gate or authentication on the device, and which you choose will depend upon circumstances. Certainly in the area of COVID status credential checking, which is something that we're involved in another Innovate UK project in at the moment, on-device checking is preferred. Project Laminar uses at gate, with Eurostar uses at gate checking. The benefits are clearly that by binding the passenger with their photo ID, with all of their information and the information which is supplied on, for example, public health certificates like name and date of birth, you can create a composite, fully bound identity, and then you can assure the genuine presence of the passenger. We, as iProve, assure the genuine presence of the passenger when creating that travel credential, ensuring that, for example, no morph has been used to create a fictitious, to set up credentials for a fictitious passenger. There are no in-person passport and ticket checks, as I just indicate. And finally, because the credential is actually held by the customer and by the passenger and not by the train operator, it means the train operators don't need to hold the sensitive personal data. The sensitive personal data is actually always held only by the customer and authenticated at the point of presentation. And many operators really very much like the idea of not having to hold this sensitive, especially COVID sensitive data. So to sum up, biometric facial verification offers an optimum process to encourage the return to public transport in a post-COVID world by binding people's photo ID document, their COVID status to their face. It's able to eliminate delays and queuing at stations and boarding gates where otherwise this might take place. And here are my my contact details. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think this is genuinely world-class work. It clearly makes the passenger experience so much smoother and simpler. And it really enhances the opportunity for operators. You know, you mentioned that crowding and bottleneck effect, but really ensuring safety, not just in a COVID context, but general safety going forward out of the pandemic as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to present to us. I'd like to hand over now to Gavin Neat, founder and CEO at Neatbox. Gavin will be covering the absolutely crucial topic of reducing travel anxiety and recruiting confidence in disabled passengers. Over to you, Gavin.
Hello, Daisy, and hello, delegates. It's an absolute pleasure to be presenting to you today. I have a technology company, but the technology is purely based in human-to-human interaction. And I think a lot of the times when we use technology, we forget that the human is involved. And with welcome, and you'll see the different font within the actual word welcome is all about the passenger. And indeed, at this time, our new tagline is bringing us back together. But it's worth mentioning that welcome actually existed and was launched in 2018. There was a recognition that disabled people were anxious about traveling, anxious about visiting venues, anxious about going to places. But a little bit about my background. I worked for, just pushing my slide forward. I worked in guide dogs for the blind for 18 years. This is where my interest in human interaction was concerned. My job was training people how to use guide dogs. You see me here in a picture pointing out the distance between Murray Jenkinson and a pedestrian crossing. He wasn't able to get to the button because there wasn't really any understanding as to how Murray was going to cross the road with his guide dog. And this led me to look at something that was very, very big, and it is very big. Well, it was very big in 2011, but it's even bigger now. There's a gentleman on the screen here, Ken. He's standing in a shop. He's saying, I've stood there and nobody's come to help me. And that is something that is repeated across all shops, all destinations, all train stations, all airports. Disabled people aren't getting the help that they need. Of course, what we've done with technology, we said, oh, we're going to put all the wayfinding and geofencing, and you're going to be able to then use your phone to make your way through. Whereas what I wanted to do was do something that was even more important. And that was find a way of helping the disabled person when they walked through the door. This is the disabled person arriving at a venue and going, where's the help? How can I get help? And of course, the other thing that was massive in there was helping the staff member help. Now, what have we done in the past? We've done staff training. Staff training for disabled people has led to this problem. And this problem on the screen here is a cycle of customer service complaints, where there's an incident, a complaint, you might have seen those on social media recently, an apology by the venue. They then do staff training if they're a progressive company. They will then do staff training. Then there is a passage of time, and everybody here who's on this call is going to say staff training is of massive importance. There's a massive period of time, or even a short period of time. Staff leave, staff forget the training, staff don't understand what they were taught, and indeed 80% of disabled people have hidden conditions, so the only way that you would know what to do is if they self-declared when they came up to talk to you. Many disabled people aren't comfortable doing that for very obvious reasons. So what happens is there's another incident, and then this whole cycle goes round again, and this will continue. Everybody out there who is thinking that they can just train their staff and this will never happen again is fooling themselves. It's a little bit like a restaurant having a winner of an award in 2015, putting it up behind the counter. Somebody walks in and says, oh, that's an amazing award. Oh yeah, none of the staff are here, the rest, the chef's gone, everybody there. You've still got the award on the wall. Because what we do is a CSR, what we do is a tick box. We say that our staff are aware and how to interact because at some point in the past they've given some sort of training. Just training your staff in autism awareness is not training them in disability. Just training them in visual impairment, or indeed for guide dogs. Out of the 14 million disabled people in the UK, there are only 4,000 guide dog owners, and yet we would all probably talk about guide dog owners right up there at the top. So what we actually have delivered is Welcome. As I say, it's an app. It's a free app that somebody downloads. It means they can contact the customer service team directly in any of the venues, and I'll show you who we're already installed with. They contact the customer service team, and then they provide the customer service team with information about how best to interact with them. We've got here a geofence, but when the person actually walks into this area here, they can trigger the indication that they are just about to arrive. And that can be when they're just about to arrive. It could be when they've arrived. It could be when they've arrived, taken a seat, and they're getting their breath back rather than having to instantly queue. It's worth mentioning that we're the only company in the world that is delivering staff training by proximity. This is some of the information. This is the management system we have. This is the customer service team get to see this. They see a picture of Gavin. They know that Gavin wants you to know a little bit about Huntington's disease. We had this demo for an airport. We're installed with Edinburgh Airport. I have a flight at 12:30, but I really need to pick something up, toiletries, before I go to the gate. So we know what Gavin's wanting to do when he arrives. Imagine that at a future railway station where we already know what Gavin wants to do. Gavin goes to the customer service area, which we've hinted he should be going to, and then is met by somebody who already knows what he looks like, already knows what his name is, but then an overview of Huntington's disease, then top tips on how you should interact with somebody with this particular condition, resources, which is a link to the charities that gave us the overviews and the top tips, and question responses. This could be any set of questions before the person arrives. We're already installed with quite a few companies, as you can see on my slide here, including Irish Rail in Dublin. We are talking with a couple of rail providers here in the United Kingdom, and we've had a lot of interest abroad. You'll also notice on here we have the likes of the NHS, RNIB, Northlink Ferries, Edinburgh Airport, Jenner's House of Fraser. Scottish Government. There's a lot of people paying a lot of attention, and just last week we won the World Summit Award for inclusion and empowerment for disabled people. That is pretty much us. You can download the app for free. You can contact us at hello@neatbox. Scan the code here. I'll leave it there for a couple of seconds, and people can contact us and install the whole system for next to nothing. Monthly subscription service. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Please contact me, Gavin Neat, on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think this is an area of work that's been magnified by COVID, but of course was, pre-existing for a long time before that. And it has to be a priority as we come out of this crisis, with that fact that 1 billion people globally live with some form of disability. The real number's probably higher. This is not an area that any nation, any region, any operator can neglect, either in a moral sense or in a financial sense. So a really, really crucial topic. Thank you so much for your time. And now, last but certainly not least, on to Craig Ashford, Management Consultant for Safe Surface Sensor, who will be presenting on the innovative Safe Surface Sensor and how this can help us get back to normal.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Daisy. As mentioned, my name is Craig, and I'm currently supporting the team at Safe Surface Sensor. I joined the team purely because I believe the Safe Surface Sensor as a product has the ability to build consumer and passenger confidence and will play a massive part in the restarting of the economy. To start off with, I'd like to show a short video which will give you a flavour of what we're all about. Okay, so that was a quick video just explaining what Safe Sensor is all about. As we all recognise, building confidence in public transport as a whole is vital in restarting the economy. And without this, we'll struggle to get back to what is known as normal. So I'm very pleased to have been given the opportunity to discuss how Safe Surface Sensor can help. I'm pleased to say I had absolutely nothing to do with the technical development of the sensor system. This has been created by two professors from the University of the West of England, both of which are directors and founders of the Institute of Biotechnology. Our vision at Safe Surface Sensor is a simple one, and that is the idea of getting us back to normal. And we believe that that's going to start with public transport. The ability to give the public confidence not only to use the train network, but all forms of public transport is going to be vital. That's to get them back to retail shops, to get them back into city centres, and to get them back into offices and places of work. So how does it work? The sensor itself is a 3 by 4 centimetre biodegradable sensor that can be placed around, for example, train carriages. Then, as the cleaning operatives move into the carriages, we would suggest that they use a fogging system as the form of sanitisation to take place. Fogging plays a vital part in the system as it sanitises both hard and soft surfaces, but also it covers every surface. And I think from what we've seen from some of the presentations today, many of the train companies are already have a fogging system in place. Once the cleaning operative has fogged the carriage, they can use our mobile app to confirm that sufficient sanitisation has taken place. And this is instantaneous. They would simply hover over the sensor using a mobile application, and it will give them a direct reading based on if that area has been effectively sanitised. That also gives you as managers the confidence to know that those carriages have been cleaned effectively. But what we also then do is take that data, and then that's instantaneously sent to our data warehouse where it can be recalled by customers. Safe Surface Sensor doesn't verify the data. It is purely a third-party host for the data that can then be accessed by yourselves or the general public. Transparency is key. As mentioned, a lot of people are already fogging and sanitising areas. However, that isn't relayed back to the customer. For this to work, the general public must be able to access the data to give them confidence. In the case of a train carriage, each carriage will display essentially what is a poster with a unique QR code on it. Customers can then simply, before they board the train, scan the QR code, and then that will give them the information of when that carriage was last sanitised. They can then board that carriage safe in the knowledge that it has been recently sanitised and is as free from viruses and bacteria as possible. It's worth noting that during our trials on multiple buses, aircraft, ambulances and classrooms, that we recorded that the fogging system was not only more effective, but it was also a quicker and more cost-efficient way of sanitising public spaces. So what can we offer? We can offer a tailored sensor plan for each individual environment. We will provide the software and the mobile device for actually using the system. We will house the data and provide instantaneous access for both you as the provider of the service and for the customers if required. And we can also facilitate the fogging process should you not have that in place. And that's about it from me. I'm more than happy to take any questions, or do feel free to contact me after the webinar. Daisy, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing. I love the video, by the way. And I think generally speaking, the combination of the sensors, the fogging, plus the app, so the monitoring element from both the staff side and the customer side, it's such a clear confidence booster. So thanks for your time presenting today. And thank you so much to all our speakers. I think we've had some amazing content and some truly marvelous innovations. We are at 11 o'clock, so people may well need to drop out, but we do have a couple of minutes for Q&A. So I'm just going to look to the questions, which I will open up to all the panelists. We've got a couple of questions here. So question from Dave Brooks, understanding that finance is a consideration, why is UV not being trialled as a solution for purifying air on rail vehicles, as costs can be reduced if this is done on a large scale? Is there anyone that wants to come in on the UV front? Oh dear, Dave, it looks like you might have asked a slightly tricky question on that. One thing I will say, Dave, in answer to your question, is Transport for London is obviously trialling UV facilities across kind of stations and a couple of their assets as well. But as you've correctly identified, I think that the cost is definitely a key element here. And, you know, there are kind of robotic and automatic systems that are being used. But I think that, you know, some of the barriers to that definitely do come from the complexity around actually organising that approach, as well as, you know, the cost of it, given how many kind of facilities and the amount of rolling stock that we have in the UK, not even to think of other nations, definitely makes that a challenge. There's definitely a role, I think, from my perspective, that UV can play, but it's perhaps a bit more limited than solutions that might be slightly simpler, including things like fogging and long-term sanitation and hygiene processes, which are slightly easier to implement. So there's definitely a place, but I think that it's maybe a little bit more niche than some of the other hygiene approaches. We do have another question here, which is quite a general question that I'm sure one of our panelists would like to come in on. What do we think about the French announcement? So French regulators voted late on Saturday to abolish domestic flights on routes that can be covered by train in under 2.5 hours, as the government seeks to lower carbon emissions, even as the air industry reels from the global pandemic. So, of course, looking to our net zero ambitions in the UK, but of course the kind of global net zero requirement and need in the context of climate change. Do any of our panelists have a particular opinion about that abolition of domestic flights, where train travel potentially is the kind of more relevant and more carbon friendly approach?
I'm happy to jump on there, Daisy, quickly. Although I've been developing travel space, my kind of background is in rail ops and performance, and I've spent probably about the last 6 years dealing with strategic planning and specifying new railway lines and rail franchises. And it's something I always like to jump on. So I use the example of Singapore to Kuala Lumpur or California high-speed rail, where you look at these densely populated flight routes and you say, well, actually, we can carry more people on train, which is great. It reduces CO2. But also we should consider that airport landing slots are themselves restricted. So what you can do by freeing up airport landing slots by moving people on train is then bring in higher value flights from further away, longer cities, bigger cities, and kind of grow those destination pairs. So yeah, very supportive.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We have one question left. How can rail manufacturers best prepare for these changes, these challenges? So does anyone have a particular view on the manufacturing front that they'd like to come in with? Have I got quite a shy panel?
No, not even slightly.
No, I know you're not, Gavin. I know you're not at all. I think it's quite a specific question. I think in terms of the manufacturing front, from my perspective, with a view to all of our panelists today, from me, this is very much about that consultation and engagement process. So, you know, silos have been mentioned in the chat previously. One of the real challenges that we have as an industry is that rail, I mean, certainly in the UK and in many other nations, is a very kind of siloed industry, both in terms of manufacturing, in terms of data, in terms of passenger access and information. I think if one thing that I could say in terms of rail manufacturers preparation, kind of future proofing, not just for manufacturers, but for all of us, from innovation through to kind of frontline delivery and service, it is about that communication. It's about that consultation. It's about keeping those channels open. So I would say that very much making sure you're actually linked into the market as it is, and that you're having those conversations is really crucial at the moment to make sure that you've got that prepared future look.
Can I add to that, Daisy? I'll just add something very quickly to that. One of the things we get asked a lot is about how to actually ensure that services are accessible for disabled people. And this includes manufacturing, because of course we're building rolling stock or stations, whatever it might be. And one of the things I always point out to people is that you don't ask disabled people what they need, you employ them. Employ disabled people within your organizations and you are going to get information inbuilt into your DNA. And I would ask everybody that's on the call to actually look internally and say, how many disabled people do we have working within our organization? And what levels are they at? And what are the feedback that we're getting from them about the services we're delivering, or indeed the products that we're manufacturing? If you aren't employing disabled people, that should be changing anyway, because there are some blooming geniuses out there that you're missing out on having them on your companies, be they software developers or whatever it might be. So I would always say, start with employing the people who are going to use the service.
Absolutely. Really good point. Thank you so much, Gavin. We are slightly past time, so we are going to close the meeting now. Thank you so much to all the speakers. Thank you so much to everyone for your time and attending the meeting. I really do encourage you to contact everyone who spoke and presented today. Feel free to get in touch with us via the original Catch the Train web link or the email if you didn't catch someone's particular contacts or email address. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week wherever you are in the world, and thank you so much.